Today we have a real treat in the studio, Brandon Andra. So quick bio on Brandon. Brandon is the founder of MPWR Solar, a door-to-door solar sales and marketing company which prides itself on helping sales reps not only achieve financial freedom, but better themselves while doing it. In addition, Brandon also hosts the Sovereign Podcast, a podcast for those striving for strong and meaningful self-development in all avenues of life. So welcome in, Brandon.
Thank you. I'm really honored. You've had an impressive lineup on guests on the show, and so it's good to be here.
Yeah, you're right up there with them, man. As I mentioned, I've followed you on social media. I've seen some of the stuff that you're doing, your podcasts, what you do with MPWR, and so I'm really glad you're here, man, to hear hear your story. So cool. Well, with that, Brandon, typically where I love to start with my guests is to just talk a bit about your upbringing. So college or high school, early days, kind of any events that influenced you to be who you are today, man.
Yeah, I think I just had a really kind of three thoughts here. Probably just a regular childhood. Grew up in Highland, which Highland's changed a lot since when I grew up there. There wasn't any new developments, any big houses. It used to be just very middle class, small town. And a lot of people didn't know where Highland was. I remember going on my mission in Southern California, and I'd get asked all the time, where are you from? And nobody knew Highland. They knew Alpine. But anyways, so had that. I had really awesome parents that just loved and supported us, which, getting older in life, I realized like maybe a lot of issues that I've avoided or self-love or different things that I think other close people deal with. I avoided those just because my parents were always just so loving and accepting and supportive. So I'm really grateful for that. But I think if I look back and say, is there anything about my childhood that impacted who I am today and what I'm doing for work or what I'm passionate about? And I'd say definitively, yes. There's one thing that I can narrow down pretty clearly, and it's the greatest gift I believe that my parents ever gave me was nothing. And I think that's what made me who I am. I think my personality is, if my parents would have been supporting me and paying my car and my car insurance and my cell phone and whatever, I would still probably be in their basement just like freeloading, Yeah. And so I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I genuinely believe that was probably part of their design, that they never supported me. And it was, you got to learn how to work and you got to go do things on your own. And that's going to be the best for your self-development. So I still hold that philosophy today, is that, I don't, if we say, does money help or hurt our kids? I would definitely lean on the hurt side. Now, I like something for nothing. I'm a principle-based guy and I don't believe in that principle, right? And so if there's a way that they can attain it in a plan, then I can see where that can be helpful. But I think that's the gift that they gave me, which has shaped my life and led me to where I'm at today.
That's great. And it's kind of backwards thinking as a parent. I have 3 kids. I
4 kids.
Some kids. Yeah. You want the best for your kids, and the natural tendency is like, I want to go buy my daughter or my son these nice things. And as an entrepreneur, for me at least, part of my drive is like, maybe I didn't have some of those things or those experiences, and I'd love to give them to my children. But the balancing act is, well, if I, fly them around on first class and I buy them all this stuff and I do all these things for them, where's that going to leave them from a mental, standpoint and drive standpoint? So it's kind of a tough thing to figure out.
True. And I think if you have to fall somewhere, I think experiences is the way to go versus things. Yeah. Cars and houses and paying them for work they don't do, all that stuff, right? Like I just immediately think back to a lot of our meaningful experiences with our kids have been ones that didn't cost a whole lot. Like we went down to Costa Rica and we're down there and had this house and got to be friends with these caretakers after visiting the same house over a couple of years. And inviting them over for dinner one night, and their boy was the same age of my boy, and just seeing them play in the pool together where they can't communicate. He speaks Spanish, my boy speaks English, but to see how they were able to play together. And at the end, my son gave him his toys before he flew back home. And that was a beautiful experience, and that's not supporting my kid and giving him something for nothing, but I think he'll remember that. And the reason why we designed that trip is, the biggest smiles I've seen from people in this world are the people that don't have much, but they're the happiest. And, we always joke around the US like, oh, we're going to go down to Africa and help these people. And I'm like, first of all, have you been to Africa? because when you go there, they're happier and they have less problems than people here. I remember talking with one of the tribal leaders there, and how he taught us that the people that leave the tribe and go to college and go to the city struggle with anxiety and depression, all these things. And he's like, we don't have anybody that has any of those challenges that's here in the tribe. And so I think I have a different paradigm that we should be learning from people in those cultures, not we're going to go help them. Like, if anything, they can help us,
Yeah, I love it. That's great. And where did you serve your mission? You said Southern California?
Southern California, yeah. Carlsbad mission.
Carlsbad.
Yeah, okay. So it was like Newport down to San Diego.
Okay. I was a San Fernando mission.
Oh, cool. So right there.
Right there.
Super
Good times.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. So transitioning from childhood, high school.
Yeah.
Your college experience. I've had varying responses to that in terms of what the intent was going to college, the thought process, and I would love to hear kind of your experience and how.
Here's my thoughts, and like I'll put my money where my mouth is, because this is what we're teaching our kids: is that if you have a specialty trade, like you want to go become an attorney, a doctor, any of those things, I think school is very important. If you're not, then I think schools can be worthless, and your money and time could be used in a more valuable state. What I mean by that, like, let's say, like a typical guy that you talk to, like, what are you going to school for? Business? What do you want to do? I don't really know, whatever, right? That's where it's a waste of time. I think take that 4 years and go form an apprenticeship. Go find like a Dave Allred or a Casey Baugh or somebody like that and say, look, I'll even pay to work for you guys, but I want you to teach me, and I'm going to be here for 4 years. I think you will get 10x, and I'm not trying to exaggerate. I think you will get 10 times more out of that 4 years and that money than you would get going and screwing around at school and studying stuff that you don't even know it's going to apply in biology and all this crap that you'll probably never use again in your life. That's just my take on it.
I think that's spot on. I've said this before, but I took the very traditional route, like 4-year degree, corporate job. And I think that was great, but I would even say there's also the danger of like, I'm going to go to school to go earn a solid paycheck and have security. And my advice would be, if you're going to go to school and you're going to take a job where you're going to learn the most, not get paid the most.
Sure.
And that's a very dangerous thing when kids are like, I'm going to go make $100,000 out of school. That's great. But maybe you're punching numbers in a computer in a back office and you're not really getting a skill set, because like you said, you're going to learn the most. Go work for free, take a pay cut, but take that first job out of college or out of high school is the most important one, where you're really learning a craft, a skill, and just learning on someone else's dime, or like you said, potentially paying them to learn. But I couldn't agree more.
And we know those guys, they wouldn't make you pay to work for them.
Right.
They'd probably pay you, if anything, work for free. But I think you'll get more out of it, And a lot of kids, like when you're in school, everybody would ask me, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I'm like, I haven't done anything, so how should I know? And there's this huge amount of pressure. And so I think instead of committing to a degree, why don't you just go work for somebody and start getting a feel? And maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But you're going to learn a lot either way. And especially for you, Chase, like now you're doing real estate. You just partnered with Dave Allred. I mean, you could have came out of high school and just worked for somebody like a Dave, doing multifamily value add or building from the ground up. Like that would have been incredible for you. But and
it doesn't have to be, like a sexy title or sexy job or big company either. It can be like, I had a guy in here last week who his first role was, somebody he had met while at school, and it was like a one-man shop when he just sat at his, his feet and learned how to develop multifamily. Yeah. And it was probably grunt work initially and learning how to put capital together. But if I went to go work for JP Morgan, where I was kind of like a cog in the wheel, a very small piece of a massive company. And I really could only have visibility into like one or two skill sets or portions of putting a real estate deal together. Totally. But if you can go work for a two-man shop and learn the whole spectrum and then go do it, on your own, it's super smart. So I love it, dude. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I know you had spent some time in door to door. So was that during your college experience, and how did that shake out?
During my college, never thought I'd do it. I didn't really know anybody that I loved or respected a ton at the time that did door to door. It's the opposite. I like kind of, thought very poorly of most people I knew that were in the space. But a bunch of my friends were going out. I got engaged and I was like, okay, this is the vehicle. My wife and I wanted to travel and go move to a different country after we got married. And so we saw that as a vehicle to go do that. So I jumped in, we did it for 6 years. It was incredible for what we learned, like what we're talking about. The money was great too. I mean, able to buy a house and travel and do all the things we'd want to do at an early age in my early 20s was like just awesome. I never thought I'd have that experience. But looking back now, it's the learning. There's 3 subjects that I think anybody should become a master of if they want to be a millionaire or get towards financial freedom. And 1 is communication, 2 is psychology, and 3 is finance. I just think those are monumental in having a lot of success financially. And so door to door, I got a master communication and I learned a lot about psychology and interactions through seeing thousands of transactions take place. Right. And so did that for 6 years. We had our second kid. My wife was like, hey, no more moving out. Let's settle down. Let's, set up some roots, which I got after 6 years. And so I made this spreadsheet. I remember it like yesterday, where essentially I wanted to go and apprentice, like we're talking about, somewhere for 1 year and then go do my own company. And I was leaning towards software. And so these were all software companies. Made the spreadsheet. There was around 20 pieces of criteria of narrowing down which company I thought was the best. And I confidently thought that Qualtrics would be the best tech company to come out of Utah. So that's where I went and spent 1 year there. And looking back, like I'm proud of that because out of all the companies on the spreadsheet, by far they performed the best. And so I learned a ton. I learned so much from being there. And then I transitioned and I did a startup with 2 friends, one that was a childhood friend. And we did that for 4 years. And that to me was my master's degree. And that's why I'm maybe more biased on go learn and go work. And that's where you'll learn versus like studying from a textbook or from a professor that hasn't done it. And I learned so much and we raised capital. And it was 2 years into that experience that we were raising around and we were pitching a local CEO here that's a billionaire and his friends. And we laid out everything. And at the end, he's like, I'm in, and his friend's in, and they write us a big check, And then we were just bonding as friends. And he said, hey, Brandon, do you want to know what our greatest secret is? And I said, what? And he said that all of our people spend all their money every year. And so they have to keep coming back. And he started laughing and like hit me on the shoulder, and his friends started laughing. And this was like a big moment for me because I'm a big believer when you hear truth, like, there's an eternal truth. And when you hear the opposite, you just feel dark and like that's messed up. And so this was a moment and I'm like, I got to stand up for what I believe in. So I said, man, I just think that that's messed up. And it just went like silent, like the conversation changed like that,
Wow.
And so he said, well, what would you do? And I said, the knock on the door-to-door industry is that people make incredible amounts of money, but everybody spends it every year. It's broken. Like there's so much money there, but nobody progresses financially towards like financial freedom. They get a lot of things, yes. But their financial literacy is so low and it seems like companies are like preying on them, right?
Yeah.
And so I said I would teach them financial freedom and he said, then they'll leave. And I'm like, that's the point is I think this whole industry was meant to be a springboard, not a destination. And I think really if you transform lives, more people will come. And that's more of an abundance mindset, right? Like there's enough, there's always enough. And I think he was thinking more scarcity because he said they'll leave. And so we agreed to disagree and we did it. We ended up in a friendly manner, but he said, just so you know, Brandon, every company in this space has copied our model and it works. And so like right then and there, like I was so happy to be out of door to door. I was so happy to be in tech and work with the people that I worked with, but I knew I was going to come back to this space. I just didn't know what yet. Right. And so a couple of years pass and it's time to transition to the next thing. And we just land in Costa Rica and they announce, it's the weirdest thing. Like looking back, I'm like, how did this happen? But on our flight, the pilot announced when we landed, Costa Rica just hit their 100th day in a row of being powered completely as a country off renewable energy. And I never really thought about that. So we're on this trip And I start researching while I'm on the trip, like, where does power come from? What's the US and Costa Rica and all these countries? And I'm like, man, this is actually pretty cool. And so start digging in, and had a friend that connected me with some other big companies here where I was able to sit down with their finance team and go through the numbers. And after selling software primarily into healthcare, I think in sales, you get to a point where it's like, if it's a hollow product, like it's not really changing the world or anything, you start to like get over the product a little bit. Like you want more, you're searching for something bigger. And what I quickly found with solar is the homeowner can win. They can save a massive amount of money. The world can win, and the sales reps can win. And it like a win-win-win. I hadn't had that yet in my life. And so very quickly I fell in love with that. And I'm like, this is the next thing. And if I can go back to that conversation earlier, if we can go into this solving financial literacy and really empower these people to gain financial freedom, and then invest a lot on the self-development side through coaching programs and third parties, and there's a track there, then I could do that the rest of my life. Like I would do that for free. And so that's how Empower was born. And this is our 5th year this year. So
that's great. So just to clarify, the executive that you were sitting down with was in the door-to-door space. And he's referring to his CEO
of a door-to-door company.
His reps just blowing their cash every summer and coming back for more. And and that is something I've seen. And I've had Casey Baugh on the show, and I've had Jared Taggart, who was a sales door-to-door rep for 10 years and then started a clothing brand.
Yeah.
And both of them, specifically Jared, has said, like you said, if the skills you learn from summer sales as a rep, if you could translate that work ethic, the communication, the skills, the sales abilities, and channel that, taking that capital, either deploying it into something else, or those skills and allocating it somewhere else, you could, 10x your abilities, or your portfolio or whatever it is. And so I think that's spot on, and kudos to you guys for trying to help, guys get off the ground, and instead of just making some dough and blowing it. So I love it. Well, so you're 5 years in.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about Empower and what exactly you guys do. It per your website sounds like it's like a sales force, or are you doing actual product installment, or is it help us understand
we're starting to go down the product installment side and sales, and then quickly realize that sales it could scale quicker, and it's less to take on there. I mean, there's the install side is a massive undertaking. So we decided that, got acquired by a finance company in the space, and that's been a really good partnership. That's been about 2 years now, and they just basically are running their company. Nothing's changed at Empower. We're still doing our thing, and they've been great. Our 2 whys are financial freedom and individual growth. So we've stayed very true and authentic to the idea of the conception. Just this year, we'll invest around $1 million just on the self-development side through partners and coaching programs to help everybody be growing. And the idea is, like, if we can help that person work towards financial freedom or achieve financial freedom to where they can transition to their next thing, that they've grown a lot as a human along the way, and they're ready, and they can look back and think, man, that was the best experience for my life, and that set me up for everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so I think where that's helped us, we didn't design that to help us grow or like a sales thing about the company. But it's definitely helped us grow because it differentiates us from everybody else. Like people feel the difference. They quickly realize culturally, like, this is just normal to be working towards that financial freedom to exit. And it sounds contradictory, but essentially I'm building a company that helps them leave.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense. And I've got feedback from other CEOs in our space, like, we just don't understand. That's okay. We have a different model, right? Mm-hmm. And that's our why. And we're staying true to our core values, which are good humans and ambition. I think a lot of companies go wrong by trying to get anybody and trying to get that best salesman and whatever. We don't care. We're willing to compromise our growth to make sure that we hire the right people. That's a very big and important thing for us. So the space has changed a lot. I can say I don't think I'd honestly start a solar company today. It's becoming a red ocean. It's highly competitive. Mm-hmm. I think at the time it was great. But I think if I was looking to do something else, it would be where the puck's going and new products and finding blue oceans.
Yep.
But yeah, like nothing's changing. I see myself doing this long term and love my job. I love the impact aspect. I love what we're doing with people and changing lives. And so, this is the track that we're on.
I love it. So when you recruit sales reps onto your team, I mentioned I had John Taylor, shout out to John with Grit and Grit. So they have their Grit sales force, and then for each summer they'll take reps and they'll slot in groups with, Rid Pest and Altera and with, other pest control companies.
Yeah.
And they'll kind of rep that flag for that summer, come back into the mothership and get trained by Grit through their product. But is that kind of how it works for you guys? Or are MPWR reps going out in the summer to work for Vivint Solar or other companies? Or are you branding? Is it your own? Yeah. And sorry, I'm naive, a little bit naive in the space.
That's a good question. Yeah.
So just trying to figure out how it works.
Yeah. I think there's some differences. It's not like a traditional summer model.
Okay.
Some people are working year round. Some people are working 3/4 of the year, summer. So we want to adjust it to that individual and what works best for them. And then the second thing is, probably similar as far as the partnership side, like you just explained, but that's not the long-term solution. The long-term solution is we do want to verticalize the business and control every aspect.
Okay.
And so we're already working on those pieces right now as we speak.
Got it.
And so we'll keep verticalizing the business for sure.
Okay, cool. And what does it take to do that? So from transitioning from a sales force to, the MPWR logo on the side of a solar panel, and like you guys are doing the distribution, you're installing. What is kind of the strategy there, and how are you thinking about funding that? Would that be self-funded, or how would you get that off the ground?
Yeah, everything. All options are on the table, and that's what's really fun and exciting about the time right now is there could be an acquisition that could help fund that side, or we could self-fund it. Mm-hmm. I think the key component is less about how to fund it and more how to just nail it, right? Like the experience is so important for the sales rep and the homeowner that we just need to do it right in whatever way that is. I'm not a huge fan of funding. I think that can cause things to happen too quickly and quality can slip. I'm a big fan of organic growth and making sure that you really nail things. And it grows in an organic way. Looking back at different companies I've done, I think sales and funding covered up a lot of sins. And if I could go back, I probably wouldn't take on capital. So yeah, we're just trying to do those things in a good organic way, but looking at all options along the way as well.
Great. And you guys are based in Lehigh, is that right? Okay.
In Pleasant Grove, Linden area.
Okay, cool. Do you have some physical office space?
Yeah.
Both those areas?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And how many reps are you guys working with now?
It's a moving target. We're growing every year, which is awesome. But there's always a gap between what's in the system and what shows up and what finishes the year. So I think it'd be realistic maybe this year to be around the 700 rep range.
Cool.
At its peak, but that'll fluctuate at different times of the year. So I think that's where we'll be this summer.
Awesome. And how many markets are you guys covering right now across the country?
We are in 4 markets, pretty strong, and then testing out new markets. Yeah.
Got it. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's good stuff, man. Sounds like 5 years in, you've got some great concepts in the work and ideas for growth, and excited to see where you guys go. Was there anything else you want to touch on MPWR, Brandon?
No, it's extremely hard, and there's challenges like any business, but at the end of the day, it's I love who I work with. I love what I'm doing, and it's so fun. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And I guess, sorry, last thing here, your role right now, kind of, founder, are you CEO? You kind of running the ship day in, day out?
Yeah.
Facilitating the trainings and doing all that for your reps? Or how are you, I guess, how's the structure look? Do you have team leads, regionals?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think we're structured just like you said, like probably a typical door-to-door model where you have all these layers of leadership. Mm-hmm. And with that, every year my role kind of changes. When we first started the company, it was very much a sales and manager role. Not a lot of difference between what a sales rep or a manager does today for us. And then the next year is more about working with the team leads. And then the next year was more about working with the layer in between the team leads and, and then the next year was, so every year it's moving to more of a higher view. Not that it's better or worse, just focusing on bigger picture, longer term things versus in the moment. And so, just the role changes every year. So this year I'm focused a lot about our self-development track that we can provide for both leaders and reps, focused a lot about verticalizing the business, doing a lot of investing on, and trying to help with the education piece around that, like bringing people in. And so that's entirely different than what it was 2 years ago, right? Yeah. I wouldn't have had the time or capacity to do that.
Sure.
So that's what's so cool about the business is every year the capacity opens up where I can do things that impact their lives more than just helping them sell another deal.
Yeah, that's great. And are you having, you mentioned Casey or some of these other guys, is it, hey, this week we have a guest speaker to talk about X or Y and
totally
just getting your guys started.
Yeah, and that could be a Zoom or that could be in person. It just depends where our reps are and what's most beneficial for the greater audience.
Yeah. And have you seen, the vision for you guys is creating financial freedom. Have you had, guys over the last 5 years come in and, make good money and kind of move on and seen that come to fruition?
Yeah, not a lot of people transition out yet, but a lot of people that have had incredible success stories with their financial freedom and their literacy that have came from a home where parents make 60 grand, whatever. And that's what they thought they were going to make. And maybe they're going to go be a teacher or something that it was just right down that same road. And then now they've done a complete 180 and thinking about investing in their net worth and what it is already. And so that's been, as you can imagine, that's really cool to see and very impactful. And so I don't know. It's interesting. Like I genuinely created this for people to transition. What I'm learning though, is I think if people are making a lot of progress towards financial freedom and they're making a lot of income, there isn't really a reason to leave. And so, so it's tricky. I guess what I want to do though is create an opportunity where they can, and that's kind of the goal.
Yeah. I love it. Well, you touched on just a little bit, but in terms of what your end game is for Empower, maybe it's an acquisition or something, but like 5 or 10 years down the road, is this kind of for you? Maybe you don't know, but like Brandon, Andra, like this is my legacy. This is going to be the next couple decades of like Empower building it out, or is it? I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I would guess that there would be an acquisition / liquidation event, here in the next while. But I don't see my role changing at all. Like this is what I love doing. This is what I want to be doing long term. I love the impact. I was very intentional about how I got to here.
Yeah.
And right now I don't have any other plans. So
good deal.
If anything, just maybe a little more capacity to do more investing and time with the family. But as far as my day job, I love it.
That's great, man. Well, cool. Yeah. Glad you could run us through that and share some of that detail. You're the host of the Sovereign podcast, and it's one that I've listened to and was one that kind of modeled a little bit off of what we're doing here. You've had some awesome guests, and tell us a little about the podcast and kind of your intent in doing that show.
Yeah, it just really lines up with our whys. We had an internal podcast for the first 2 years, so you could only access it if you worked for Empower. And then what was happening is people kept saying, hey, my parents want to listen to this. Like they overheard it. That was so awesome. They want to learn about investing in real estate or tax strategies or stocks or all these different things. And my brother, whatever. Right. And so that's why we transitioned and opened it up. So it's not really new. It's just, it's a different name and it's public now, but we've been doing this for 4 years. And the goal is just to tap into greatness out there. People like yourself that have been very successful in their trade, to have them come on and teach our people and advance them either in a self-development realm or a financial freedom realm. And that's all it comes down to. So it just aligns with our why and what we're already doing. We're just trying to do it at a bigger scale.
That's great. And do you have your own studio? Where do you produce it?
Yeah, we have our own studio at our building.
Okay.
It's right on the border of Linden and Pleasant Grove. Just to clarify from earlier, not 2 locations, just one. Okay. But it's right on the border. So people always some people call it Pleasant Grove or Linden, but yeah, we have a really cool studio, and it's we've got so much value out of it. So it's been amazing, and it's a fun space too. It's different.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, I've said this, and anyone who has a podcast, I think, has the same sentiment of like, if you're thinking about networking or getting further outreach or trying to either add value to someone's life or receive value, I think a podcast is just a really great platform to do it. And right now I feel like podcasts kind of are a dime a dozen. I feel like everyone's
sure,
but if you can get past 20 episodes, I think Jimmy said this, like only like 2% of podcasts make it past like 20 episodes.
Wow,
and like crazy. 1% is like past 50 or whatever. Yeah. But I think consistency and just trying to add value is key. So
sure.
Cool, man. Well, speaking about entrepreneurship, it sounds like from a young age, not having a lot handed to you kind of drove you to want to get your own. But why did you choose the entrepreneur route? I mean, you mentioned college, but going into door to door, starting your own company, tech side, and doing this, what was the thought process?
I think once you experience sales, it's really hard to go to a salary job or anything that's fixed or capped. And I think that's where entrepreneurship feels, it aligns very well with sales, which is the more work you put in, the more you'll be compensated, right? And so I wouldn't try and put just entrepreneurship in its own bucket. I would say like, hey, anybody that's doing sales probably, you probably are experiencing a very high level degree of entrepreneurship. You're running your own book business. It could be whether you're selling insurance or real estate or solar door to door. Like, I think that's entrepreneurship. And so my thought is I do think a lot of people, it's hard to get financial freedom if you're capped. It's hard. It's going to be really hard to do it. I haven't seen a lot of people save their way to wealth. I think you're going to have to earn and invest your way to wealth. And that's really hard to do if you're at a fixed amount of income every year. And so I'm a big fan of sales and entrepreneurship and going and doing something that can create a vehicle for you to expedite that financial freedom. I just don't buy into, support, or love the idea of work till you're 62 or 65 and then go enjoy life the rest of your life. Like, go get that financial freedom, go get free so that you're not burdened by that one thing that unfortunately we all have to deal with, which is money, so that you can go enjoy life and have freedom and go experience the world. And I think ultimately a lot of our experiences and our level of enjoyment this life, not all of it, but can come from the places we go, the people we meet, the books we read. And there's just so much there. And it's hard to do that when you're, just stuck at that fixed position. So that's why I got into it.
Yeah, that's so good. When I had Dave Allred on here, that was one of his biggest points. When I asked him, how did you get to 40 units? How did you get to 1,000 units in a personal investment portfolio?
Yeah.
And his answer was, I took active income from a high earning job, which was sales.
Yeah.
And put that into a passive vehicle and just did it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a high earning, or if you have a cap on your earning potential, it's very hard to deploy capital into a passive vehicle. And sure, there are ways you can try to figure it out. Hard money loans, house hacking, there's very creative strategies, and not to knock on those, but I think scaling is a lot more challenging. And a lot of times you have to give up equity or partner, or there's some form of crutch when you're going that route. But to your point, if you can just make enough money and work hard enough and then just pour that into something, put the fuel on the fire and build a passive income stream, that's the fast track to get it done.
And the only mistake I see people do that, because I'm in full agreement with that, is don't get rid of your active income too quick, because they start getting passionate about that passive income. But what's allowed you to get that passive income is that active income.
Yeah.
So time it at the right time, because that's what's allowing you to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And you talked about being capped and saving your way to retirement. I do agree that that's extremely challenging. And I want to ask you, you said it's tough to kind of focus on those things you really love when you're trying to figure out the money problem.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've struggled with yeah, just being real, it's like, I have ambitions in a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to, travel this much and give this much and allocate my time, with family or donations or whatever it is to create this experiential life. But I struggle with like, how can I do all of these things without the money problem being solved first?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of danger, I think, in that of like, well, all I'm going to do is focus on money. I feel like there's like a part of me, and maybe it's just the way my brain is wired, I have to focus on money first, figure that out, and then I can worry about like, oh, now I'm going to go do some of these other things or give back this way. And so it's like this mental block that I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts in that area.
I think so much of life is asking the right questions. And I think just that question is such an awesome question. I personally don't think there's a simple answer for it, right? On one hand, I think it's okay to work really hard in your 20s and just go all out and see where that gets you, to open up a lot of opportunities for you 30s and on, right? That's okay. On the other hand, we probably both know a lot of people that have tried to take on that work side first, and then all of a sudden they're in their 40s or 50s and they've never taken those breaks. And so I just think you got to be really intentional. And it's a very delicate, tricky thing. I found myself doing a lot of reflection on that topic over the last 17 years of why as a male or a man or a provider, whatever it is, why do I get so focused on that? And I do think there's probably like a very tribal instinct built into us as humans to take care of everything so that we're okay. Like whether it's getting your house in order or making sure that you have a sustainable food supply or like whatever, right? Like I think that's pretty built in. But luckily, living in the world that we live in today, it's just such a beautiful time that we can jump on a plane and go see a different part of the world. Like people didn't have that opportunity 80 years ago. And so I do think that we got to take advantage of that and experience life because we can. And if we look at the whole history of human beings, whatever you believe that is, whether it's 100 million years or 10,000 years, right? Either way, we haven't been able to do what we can do until like the last little chunk of time. Mm-hmm. And so experiences I'm so big on. I think that's what transforms our lives. And it's just like the boulders, rocks, sand. Like you just got to figure out what are your boulders? What are the most important things in your life that if you died tomorrow, what are the things that you need to do? What are your rocks? And then what are your sand, And so I have a list. I have this lifestyle design, very kind of similar to Dave, that I open up this doc on my computer. I look at it every morning. I have the things I need to do before I die. How the things I want to do on an annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily basis. And it's just trying to be intentional with that. Otherwise, I think a lot of us can just get, caught up in the grind and just grinding.
Yeah, exactly. It's everyone I've had on here has, I feel like such a great balance in their lives. And as I mentioned, for me, it's like, how do I have that balance and that freedom without the money issue? But I think you summed it up there nicely. It's rocks, boulders. It's making sure the core pillars of your life are taken care of. And it isn't all about money. Money solves a lot of problems, but I think there's a balance there. And striking that appropriately.
And one thing I'd say to balance is, man, that's just like, I think it's something that everybody could chase and maybe never get. That's my personal thought of it is, right. I think it's more like intentional imbalance. Mm-hmm. That look, like as a provider, you'll spend more time at work than your family. And I know that sucks to hear, but it's the reality. If you add up when you go into work at 9 and you're home at 5 or 6, like that's a huge chunk of the day that you're awake, and you'll only experience a couple hours at night with your family. Now, if you want to change that, then go get financially free and be home or whatever. But I just think that's part of life right now for most people. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have to figure out ways to be intentionally in balance to create what you want to create in your life. The other thing is, I think culturally, I grew up, whether it's more spiritual or religious views or family views or whatever, just me calling a spade, I do think money can bring happiness. And I think a lot of people are just scared to say that. But straight up, I believe money can create happiness. What I mean by that, though, the explanation behind it is I agree with the Harvard study, which is, look, if you can't provide food, water, clothing, housing, whatever, then your life is going to be incredibly hard and difficult until you get to that point where you can cover your bills and expenses and you're not just drowning, you're treading water. Up to that point, absolutely, I think money can buy happiness. Now, after that point, if you start upgrading your car and a little nicer home and whatever, jewelry, whatever, I personally don't think your happiness needle is going to move that much unless you're giving back. And a lot of people that think that money can't buy happiness, well, I don't think they've been real. I also don't think that they've probably gave back enough, because as absolutely impact can provide a real substance of happiness, not a hollow, but a real. So I would say, like, those are my two things with money and happiness. That, look, you gotta have money to survive in today's world. In the United States, it's a real thing. And that can largely be a big factor in your happiness. The other thing is, like, impact can provide a great piece of happiness for your life.
I love it, man. Yeah, it's spot on and couldn't agree more. You mentioned lifestyle design, and some habits. I'd love to dive in a little bit more there, Brandon, in terms of what you're doing on a daily basis or weekly basis to try to chart your navigate your life and create habits.
Habits, I think, man, habits are everything. Like, the one habit I have in my life that's pretty bulletproof right now is a morning routine, and I've experimented and refined and adjusted and tried to perfect that for 17 years. I think I have a pretty good one for me that works for me right now. And then I'm trying to add new habits, right? Because ultimately, I think your thoughts become actions, your actions become habits, your habits become your destiny. And so I'm always looking for new habits. And like, just last night, I tried a new one last night, a new action, right? Where I took my boy out and we had like a one-on-one. We went to the Jazz game. So I had questions to ask him driving to the game, questions to ask at halftime, and questions to ask driving home. And I think this will become a habit where it's just like, hey, how am I doing as a dad? Like, what do I do that makes you feel loved? And what's a moment that you can remember where you felt the most loved by me? What feedback do you have for me? What can I do better? And it was like, I think 75% of the stuff I could have predicted, but man, there's 25% there that I would have never predicted, where I'm like, on one hand, I'm embarrassed that I've never done this yet with my kids. But on the other hand, I'm like, at least I'm starting now, because I'm sure a lot of people don't do this,
How old's your boy?
He's 11.
Okay.
And so I'm like, dang, I had to take my girl. She's 9. We got to go do this ASAP,
Yeah.
And so I went home and thought, how can I make this a habit? And we talked about, my wife and I last night, like, maybe it's once a month with each kid over a certain age to where they can have an impactful conversation. And so that habit, like you just asked about, that habit would totally transform my life, my kids' life, and our relationship. Like, habits are so powerful. And so I'm trying to implement the habits that can be impactful and add to us in a positive way. And on that ever-ending journey of looking for those, right?
Yeah, that's so good. I think that's a great idea. And I've got, my oldest is 4, and I know, like, Dave Allred and some of these guys do like a weekly, date night with each kid, or monthly. And I think that's great, and something that would be extremely beneficial. You mentioned your morning routine. Would you be willing to kind of share kind of in detail what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah. And it varies a little bit, because on Tuesdays, Thursdays, I take my boy and, some of his friends to go work out at, shoot some hoops in the morning for basketball. But nice. on the other 3 days, and even on those 2 days, I still get the full routine in, which is wake up, work out for an hour, do 30 minutes of spiritual reading, do an hour of regular reading. And that's a book. This isn't like Audible or podcast. This is just, because I listen to podcasts and Audibles when I'm working out, when I'm driving. This is just like full time in my office reading a book. And then I have a moment, about a 30-minute period, where I do my affirmations, my visualizations, my meditation, and then I do my planning. And so that whole thing takes about 2.5 hours.
Got it. So what time are you waking up typically?
6:30.
6:30.
6:30 every day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going to bed 9:30, 10:30-ish.
No, I wish. Actually think that's like one of the most important parts of the morning routine is going to bed the night before at a good time.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just waking up, working out for that first hour. And then in between reading is when I do my gratitude, meditation, visualization, and then planning my day. And then I like to have like a 15 to 20 minute window where I'm there with the kids while they're eating breakfast before they go to school. So I can just hang out with them for a little bit. And then that's usually when I start my reading is right after they head to school and then get in that hour. So starting at 6:30 and then getting done, depending on planning and what's going on for that day, around 9:30.
That's great. Yeah. And are you, from a goal setting, like visualization standpoint, affirmations, how has that worked in your life? Have you been, an annual goal type guy, vision board, like, looking at this house in X years or this car or, we dive in a little bit there.
I think that's good. I think everybody's got to experiment what works for them. I think sometimes with goals and timeframes, it's good because you're working towards something. Sometimes I think it can be too rigid. And so what I do is I have a digital vision board that I make on my computer because it's fluid. I can take things on and off versus like a big poster that's stuck on your wall.
Yeah.
And those things are on there until they get accomplished. And when they're accomplished, then I transition and they're just front of mind, something I look at every single day until they're accomplished. And for me, that's what works well. I think sometimes it's hard and a little too rigid to say this will be done by that date. There's so many things in life, whether it's relationship, business, finance, where there's like this art of balance where you're pushing to make it done, but sometimes you can be forceful and you can force things that just stuff in the universe, whatever, it's not lined up yet. And so I think you got to find that balance of pushing and actively working towards it, but not being too forceful and letting things organically fall into place.
Yeah, that's great. I personally get a little bit of anxiety of like, I've got to have this done by this date. And what I've heard, folks say is instead of focusing on the outcome, focus on the inputs,
100%.
Which is like, what are your habits? For us as a company, it's like, hey, our end game is, 15,000 apartment units. And so, okay, let's break that down, right? 10 years, how many deals we need to get done. But more important than that, I think it's like, how many deals do we need to underwrite today or this week? How many offers do we need to make? How many people do we need to talk to? And kind of those inputs will ultimately result in an output. Because you can control your habits, you can't control your outcome. So I don't know. We've tried to shift that mentality because it's like, well, if I have a goal to, close 5 deals this year, like in a way I can control that, but really the market can shift timing, investors, whatever, right? There's so many variables, but it's like, let's focus on what we can control. And those little wins help you build confidence as opposed to just some arbitrary random goal,
Yeah. I've seen this a lot with our guys that if they focus on the outputs, it'll cause anxiety. So we always reverse engineer their goals and break it down on a monthly, daily, weekly basis. Just focus on the inputs. That's something you can control every day. So I agree with that. And then for me, that's why I currently and haven't for the last 4 or 5 years had goals attached to any one of the things I'm trying to do. Sorry, a timeline attached to anything is I'm confident in my habits, my principles and everything else. And that's how I want to live my life. And the outputs will come at the time that they're supposed to come. And, you go to a seminar and they might not line up with that, but that's what's worked organically for me in my life is that, and solely focus on the inputs.
Love it. I love it, man. What are you investing in right now? I know obviously a lot of your probably time and efforts going back into Empower.
Totally.
Are you teach your guys a lot about financial freedom. What are you doing on a personal level?
Funds. To try and do that? I've done so much different investing, and having my own doors just doesn't work. Like one phone call is too much. That's too many phone calls for me, I just need that free time to focus on the company and our people. And so funds are awesome because it's people that do what they do best and outsourcing that to them and not requiring any phone calls. And so that's what's working for me really well right now.
Good deal. And if you looked at your portfolio, is it, private equity, real estate, venture capital, stocks?
Yeah.
What does it kind of look like?
Yeah, I have a good chunk in stock and equities. I have a good chunk in real estate funds of different real estate within those funds, and then a smaller amount in private equity, venture capital, small business type of deals.
Good deal. That's great. Yeah. I think that for somebody focused on building their own business, it can be very hard to straddle your own personal investment portfolio. And not a lot of people agree with that sentiment. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners want to be involved and kind of have control. And I think it's a great approach. Like, the experts are doing it, and they're going to send me updates and keep me in the loop as much as I want to, but I'm going to focus on building your own thing. So
and it goes back to that active and passive income, right?
Yep.
Is that I want everything to be passive right now. All investments truly passive. So I don't have any capacity for anything active.
Good deal, man. Well, just a couple last questions, Brandon, and we can wrap up here. I want to talk just a little bit about mentorship. What role have mentors played in your life? And do you pay for mentorship? What are you doing right now? Would love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely pay for coaching or mentorship every year. Can go back the last probably 5 years, and I've had somebody new each year. I think I've transitioned somebody each year. It seems like for me personally, by the end of the year, I have a really good idea for the content and what this person's going to tell me in different situations. And so that year cadence has worked out well for me. If I look back and say who's had the biggest impact on my life, all those people have been massive. I think there's 3 people that, and all of them 2 of them I watched from afar. Kobe Bryant had the first impact on me in my life, where I watched someone pour so much passion into their craft and took it so serious, and they worked so hard and had so much discipline. And that's when I started selling door to door. I could take everything I was seeing and I could apply it to exactly what I was doing. And so it just translated really well. And so it sounds weird because it's somebody I've never met and never knew, but man, like if I said, hey, here's my top 3, it'd be Kobe Bryant, it'd be Stephen Covey, which I got to know and spend some time with before he passed. And then one of the coaches that I've known for almost 20 years, his name's Kevin Hall. I mean, those 3 for sure have impacted me more. And all I've tried to do is just emulate everything. I look at Kobe and I look at his discipline, his work ethic, his tenacity. And that's what I take out of him. Out of Stephen Covey, I take his principles and his quest to be a student and learning. I spent some time with him in his library once, and he told me he was reading a book a day. And we got in conversation. He could take a book out, go right to the page, talk to me about what that book taught. Like, it was incredible. And then actually one of his work partners was my other coach, Kevin Hall. And so I've just taken different pieces out of those 3 and just tried to emulate everything I've watched them do over their career.
That's great. Yeah, I've heard that some of the best mentors, don't even know that their mentees exist, right? Like, they're just looking at in social media. And speaking of social media, you've got a really strong presence and following there. I think you have over 30,000 followers. And I guess, how has that played a role in your success? And how have you built that following?
I don't know the answer to that question on playing a role, and it's part of our success. We do surveys every year at our company, and I'm not a big social media guy. And one of the things that has always been one of my weaknesses in leadership is that I can be too private. I can just grind. Like, I can come in, go straight to my work and just work all day. And I need to do better at allocating more free time and more around the cooler talk, right? Mm-hmm. And so a couple people approached me that I work with, said, look, you should get on social. We want to know like more about you and your life and what's going on in your personal life and your thoughts on stuff. And so I hated social media, but I took it as a personal challenge. Like, all right, let's do this thing, like I'm naturally very private. I don't want to show stuff. I don't want to be drawing attention to myself. And so I started last year about January-ish. So it's been a little over a year. And I don't know how I could say what that's played in success, but it has been a really cool tool for me to connect with people that I work with and people that I haven't connected with for a while, and just other people that I don't even know. and like maybe even you and I, how we got connected or whatever. Right. And so looking back, like I didn't expect that. And I'm really grateful for that. And that's why I actually am an advocate for it now, is I just think it allows you to connect with so many people at a bigger scale than you never would have.
Yeah.
And so if you do want to have an impact, if you do want to share things with the world, like this is a great vehicle. But I find myself still like putting a lot of work towards it because it's not natural. I don't enjoy it. I don't love it. I'm more private, like I said. And so it's something that I'm working on, like actively to do.
That's great. And I've felt the same way when I was kind of just in the corporate world. It was a foreign territory. I didn't even think about it. And as I've done this podcast and started this company, I've seen the value of social media. I mean, you can make 20 cold calls, or you can do, one post and reach, 100x
for sure,
that many people. And
getting smarter.
It's, different level of intimacy, but, I agree, man. That's great. Well, last couple of questions, Brandon. What would be a piece of advice you have for somebody wanting to jump into entrepreneurship or start their own business? As you've been a serial entrepreneur, you've done a couple businesses yourself. What would be a piece of advice?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm a big fan of not raising capital and just growing organically. And so when I've had close friends, family, people I know, acquaintances, and they ask this advice, I say, start with capital. And that will just allow you to grow the business in a real and organic way. I think businesses are real, living, breathing things. And I think you can compromise the integrity of the whole structure by just infusing capital and just growing like crazy. I think it's going to block and cover up a lot of stuff that you need to know and see as the owner. And it'll make you make the right decisions and not rush or cut corners on anything if you do have the capital. But if you don't, I think inherently you'll be forced into a corner where you're going to make decisions just because you need money. And those decisions probably won't be the best decisions for the company. They're the best decisions that will get you money. And so that would be my number one piece of advice, is just make sure that you have some capital to start that business so you can take some risks and you can grow it at the right risk that it needs. Otherwise, you get back into a corner and then you sign some equity away and you do things that you probably wouldn't have done before.
Yeah, that's great. And I've heard that from others as well. Keep in control and kind of slow and steady clip. Well, last question, Brandon. Something I ask most of my guests is when you look at your life as a whole, all the different buckets, how do you as an individual define a successful life?
Yeah, I think it's really simple. I think how I define success is maximizing your potential. And I think that's a universal definition that anybody can use, right? I don't think it's a number. I don't think it's a relationship, benchmark. I don't think it in any category. It's just doing the best with what you can for your potential. I had a really, really cool experience last week where I was at lunch and, I was driving back to my office and I was driving down the road and I saw this homeless man scooting across the field, this empty field. And he was scooting across because he didn't have any legs. And, it just was captivating. And so I parked the car. I was on this work call. So I finished the work call. And then as soon as I got off, I'm like, I got to go talk to this guy and just see if there's anything I can do, And I go up and talk to him. And then I found out he didn't have any fingers. And so he didn't have any legs and he didn't have any fingers. And he was extremely well put together and you could tell he's done great at providing for himself. And it was just such a cool conversation. Like, I'm honestly so grateful that he touched me in so many ways. One of the ways that he touched me is I asked him, what can I do for you? And is there anything I can do to serve you? And he said, no, I'm honestly been given more than I need. And instantly I just felt like, man, that hit me so hard, And it's just, there's so many lessons that I took out of that I went home and journaled about. But you look at this guy and I don't know what has accomplished in his life or what he will or whatever, but I looked at him and I thought he was magnifying his potential. I think he was doing so incredible with what he had. That was my genuine, honest belief. And without knowing him, I was so proud of him, so proud of his mindset, how he viewed life, where he was so happy, he was so optimistic. And I just think some of us may, if we were living in that same situation, we may not be maximizing our potential. We may be capable of more, and not to compare in any way. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying each of us know what we're capable of. And I think as we push to have a better relationship with our spouses, we push to be better parents, as we push to make more money and be better providers, not to make more money just to do it, but to try and create a better situation, whether it's impact or being able to provide or push ourselves spiritually. And I think that's where we'll feel a lot of self-fulfillment in life and a lot of gratification. And that's where I think we'll find our purpose, is just growing as much as you can grow. And I know for me, that's where I've really found that I'm on the right track. And so I'll close with this, is that I love this story. I've shared it with my group. It inspired me like 15 years ago, but it's the farmer and the egg story. And the farmer comes out and he sees this egg, and it's a bigger egg than all the chickens right next to it. But he keeps it because obviously it's by itself. He knows it's not a chicken egg, and it hatches, and it's obviously not a chicken, but it is adopted by the family of chickens. And, a couple of years go by, and it pecks food just like a chicken would. It walks like a chicken would. It doesn't fly, and it lives just like a chicken would. And so the fable of the story is that one day this bird is with the father chicken, and it looks up in the sky and it sees this eagle soaring. And he said, "Dad, what is that bird?" And the dad said, "That's an eagle. It's the most majestic bird. It controls the skies, And that chicken just thinks, what a beautiful bird. Like that, wouldn't that be incredible, right? And ends up living the rest of his life like a chicken. And I just think, man, you know what? That's so similar to life. Like when I first started my first company, I broke through this huge mental barrier of like, I didn't know that I was capable of doing it. I didn't know that you could do that. I didn't know you could break out of the shell and do this. Like, that's so cool. I had that same reaction when I broke through 6 figures for the first time. Like, dude, I can make 6 figures. Like, that's crazy. I think people feel that at different benchmarks of income, right? And so I think that's like the passion that I have, and a quest that I'm on with people I work with is like, you're an eagle. You're not a chicken. Don't live the rest of your life like a chicken. And if you are on that quest, that's where I think you'll find success. It's never a moment. You're never going to reach it, but it's this ever long journey.
So good, man. There's no better way we could have ended it, man. So thank you so much for being here, Brandon. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story with us and all your extremely valuable insights, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.